Hey, Jackie.
Hey, Zoe.
We're finally doing it. We're sitting down to the mics and starting a podcast.
I know, the millennial version of opening a bar. We're here.
We're here. We are friends from college, former roommates. I think we've been friends for 12 years
At least,
now,
yeah.
13.
Yeah, the time flies. Man, we've seen each other from when we were teenagers until now. We're in our 30s.
I can't believe I managed to hold on to you as a friend. I was such a tyrant.
No, you are not. Zoe says this. She's a liar.
Anyway, this is After MASH, the podcast where we look outside the American dream that was indoctrinated in us through those loose leaf paper games where you put MASH on the top, mansion, apartment, shack, house, and random categories, conventional categories such as who you're going to marry, what car you're going to drive, what city you're going to live in, how many kids you're going to have, and it dictated your future. And now we're here, and we're 31. What did you learn through your 20s, Jackie?
Oh my gosh, so many things. I'm excited to talk about it all with you here. I feel like, you know, when I graduated college, I thought it'd be a really straight line. A la the MASH board. It would just be finding a husband, finding a house, having kids, getting a job. But, you know, here I am half a dozen jobs later. I've lived in a bunch of different apartments with roommates. I'm living in the city. I'm still not married. Life is not the straight line I thought it would be. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to learn.
Jackie, why don't you introduce the MASH board?
Yeah, so hopefully our listeners remember the game of MASH, but if not, you're about to learn. So like Zoe said, we have 5 different categories. We have the house you're going to live in. We have husband, number of kids, what job you're going to have, and what city you're going to live in. Zoe, can you describe the life of the person who is described by this MASH board for our audience?
Yes, this is someone who is hoping to have a husband, kindly asking to have kids, and is currently working a marketing job at a tech company in New York City. If I had to place this person, they are probably 28 to 31. They are kind of coming out of the chaos of realizing that college didn't prepare you for nearly half the things it needed to prepare you for, the chaos of friendships and relationships and finances, and thinking about, you know, a genuine future as we were promised, which is a house, a husband, and kids.
Yep. Yeah, this is somebody, you nailed it. This is someone who's probably in her late 20s, early 30s. She's still living in the apartment. She hasn't settled down. And she's looking around herself going, well, now what do I do? So yeah, that's what today's episode is going to be about. The people who are at this phase of life and they're looking around them going, I thought I'd have a family by now and I don't. Or maybe I didn't think I'd have a family by now necessarily, but I thought I'd be closer towards having one. And maybe these are people who want to have a family and they're wondering how they still can have that in their future. So that's kind of the vibe I was going for. This is someone who I think we have a lot of friends who are in that boat, or, you know, of our friend group, I'm the one who hasn't gotten married yet. So maybe I'm the one who is most in that situation out of the people in our particular friend group. But I think we all know people who are in this phase of life. This sort of like, you've had your extended adolescence, you kind of gotten through it, but now you're on the other side and you're looking around going, well, but I don't have a husband yet and I don't have a family yet and I'm not owning a house yet. So what am I doing? So that is a pretty good summary of kind of where this person is who is going to be pursuing or thinking about pursuing the topic that I'll be talking about today, which is egg freezing. The reason I wanted to talk about this today is because, like I just said, I am the person in our particular friend group who has not yet found a husband and had my family and bought a house and all that stuff. And I'm 31 and I wanted to learn about how egg freezing works. Is it something that would make sense for me? I definitely do want to have a family, but you know, what is my natural fertility horizon? So there was a lot that I wanted to learn and I thought it was just really interesting. I went down a few months of a rabbit hole, and I think that this is a topic where even if you, like Zoe, I don't think you're on the market for freezing your eggs, but
I am not now.
I still think that there's a lot to learn from about like how fertility works and also how marketing works and how the world works. Like, this is a really rapidly growing elective surgery that women in their 30s can opt into. And so, like, what does that mean? What do we do with that information? So that's what we're here to talk about today. Talk to me about what you know about this topic already.
Okay, listen, I am a doctor, and as the disclaimer, I am not anyone in this room's doctor or anyone listening's doctor. I obviously went to medical school. OBGYN, obstetrics, and gynecology is one of those lower yield subjects where you have to know fuzzy things about it, but you don't really have to delve deep into it. I did a core rotation in OBGYN, which was just a lot of baby catching. As far as the menstrual cycle goes, I know that there's 2 phases for the ovary, there's 2 phases for the uterus, and the first phase is 14 days, and at 14 days you are most fertile, and then anyone who is irregular, it comes from the back half of that, and I really hope I'm remembering this correctly, otherwise that's embarrassing. I know there are various conditions that can affect fertility, endometriosis, that's about it.
Yeah, no, that was a really good summary. So, and I think that probably, aside from the fact that you've actually been in a hospital and like theoretically learned about some of this, I think that probably sums up where a lot of people have general knowledge, which is like you go through a cycle, you release an egg once a month, and you have the opportunity to get it pregnant or not. And if you don't, then you have your period, that sort of thing. So what, if anything, do you know about fertility preservation, like how old you can be when you get pregnant?
I know that as easy as it may seem when you're not thinking about it and when you're not trying to get pregnant, it's actually really difficult. Mm-hmm. I know that embryology is this like really complex thing, and the first thing I learned after medical school is that it's amazing that we all are born and resemble humans and are not cyclopses, because there are so many opportunities for things to go wrong.
Yeah.
I know that once you're 35, you're considered a geriatric pregnancy. For the record, my mom was 40 when she had me, and my dad was 45, and I turned out okay, so there is hope. I know that IVF and the various tiers of aided fertility is very expensive, not always covered, and I also know that there's no way to determine your fertility, to like predict what your fertility would be even at the end of this year. Whenever you're getting evaluated, it's a snapshot in time.
Cool. You're preaching my language. That is definitely one of the things that I learned when going on this journey that was so eye-opening. But yeah, really good summary to what you were just saying. Like, it's considered a geriatric pregnancy after 35. It could be hard to get pregnant. There's a lot of information about this sort of thing swirling around, which leads to someone like me who's 31 going on 32 and not imminently planning on having a kid going, oh my God, what do I do with all this information? Like, should I be looking to extend my fertility through something like egg freezing? So I'm going to take you on that journey today too. And at the end of this podcast, I'm going to tell you what I have decided, and hopefully you can tell me if you think it is a good idea or not. We have been...
And I actually don't know. Jackie has been like on occasion ranting at me about like what she's thinking and that she's in this journey, but we have specifically saved the outcome for today.
Yeah, this will be the grand reveal. Actually, before we get started, I have 2 disclaimers. My first disclaimer, I am not a doctor. Zoe is a doctor, but not of this kind. So none of this is medical advice, and nobody listening to this should take it as advice. You should definitely talk to your own doctor. A lot of my research was focused on understanding how people approach fertility preservation when they do not have any contraindications. So this person, if they do not have PCOS, if they do not have endometriosis, if they're not going through chemo or transitioning. And so the other thing to keep in mind is that all of the facts that I'm talking about could be different if you are in a position where you have a health situation.
An underlying medical condition.
That's the one. Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, here I am talking about medical things and Zoe's the doctor. So please, if I ever say anything wrong, let me know.
I will, but I also think it's good because not everyone is a doctor and they have to figure out how to make these decisions. So, I mean, I think it's like a really good exercise in making decisions in your life when you are not the expert.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my journey for this, I think I spent like 4 months and read like a dozen research papers and a whole book and watched 2 video essays and talked to half a dozen friends who have frozen or considered freezing their eggs. All this to say, everything that I have learned myself. This is a choice that I made to research in these things. This is not a medical school education talking to you right now. So you too can go down the 6-month rabbit hole of random elective surgeries if you so desire.
And our sources will be in the show notes.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So that was disclaimer number 1. Disclaimer number 2, egg freezing is a choice that is available to anybody who has ovaries and is producing eggs. That being said, I will probably accidentally default to saying woman or she in some situations. Just know that this is something that applies to all people who possess ovaries and no women who do not possess ovaries. Just wanted to say this doesn't necessarily exclude trans men or include trans women. Okay, so let's get into it. Egg freezing is a hot new topic. Why is that? Egg freezing stands for elective oocyte preservation, or that's like the official term for it. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but essentially what we're hearing is this is an elective choice somebody is making. Oocyte means egg, and then preservation means we're trying to preserve the eggs. Every month, a woman will have a handful of follicles in her ovaries, and some amount of them will mature. One of them turns into the egg that gets fertilized, and then all of those follicles will wind up getting discarded at the end of that month, even if they didn't turn into the egg that was going on to get fertilized. Egg freezing is the process by which you, along with a doctor prescribing the drugs, will inject yourself with hormones for 2 weeks leading up to when you would normally ovulate. So this is from when you get your period through the first half of the cycle. It causes all of the follicles to mature at once, and then you go under general anesthesia, and they remove these eggs and flash freeze them, which is also called vitrification. And then these frozen eggs can get stored kind of indefinitely, and when you're ready to use them, they get thawed and then fertilized and then screened to make sure that they are chromosomally normal. And then at that point, of the ones that have survived and have made it to that step, then you can implant them and attempt to bear a child. So that is the general arc of egg freezing. Why would someone freeze their eggs? That's definitely the first question. I think we've alluded to this a lot already, but I think in the majority of cases, this is someone who, like me, is potentially in their 30s looking around going, I want to have a family. I don't necessarily see a direct path towards having that family in the timeline that my body would allow. So let me consider what I can do to extend my ability to have children. I'm curious, Zoe, what your initial impression of that is.
It's a lot. I mean, taking the hormones is not fun, and it's also expensive. Like, you have to pay a lease fee to keep your eggs in the freezer.
Oh my God. Well, that is a perfect intro to my next topic, which is how much does it cost? Because you're right, it's expensive. So in my research, I, like I said, read a lot of articles. I also talked to 2 fertility clinics because I was pursuing this myself. And generally the quotes that I got were that egg freezing itself will cost you between $10,000 and $15,000. So that covers the doctor bills, which will be just over half of that. So in my case, the quote I was given, the doctor bills would be $8,000. And then the remainder of the $10,000 to $15,000 would be your medicine, which really the amount that you have to spend depends on how you're responding to the drugs. And so, you know, on average, maybe $7,000. So we're talking $15,000. All that does is it gets your eggs out of your body and it freezes them, which is part of the journey. But like I said previously, the journey is you take your eggs, you freeze your eggs, and then you store your eggs, and then you use your eggs.
How would you describe your healthcare? Good, bad, or average? The one that you are provided by your employer.
This is a really good question. So I have really good health care. My company also gives me a small stipend for fertility benefits, which is $10,000, but it's taxable, so it's effectively $7,000, which is why I was pursuing this in the first place. But one of the things I learned in this process is elective fertility procedures are not covered by insurance. I can put my $7,000 towards it. That would cover half of the price that we've already discussed, but not the stuff we haven't discussed yet. And no amount of my actual health insurance would cover any of this. Only 13 states even cover reproductive care in general. So if you are trying to get pregnant, failing to get pregnant, and your doctor tells you that in order to have a child, you need to pursue something like IVF, a minority of states require that medically necessary reproductive intervention to be covered by the health insurance. Massachusetts is one of them, so I'm in luck. Going through IVF or a different reproductive technology alternative could potentially also be very expensive. It's not necessarily like one is covered, one is not. So worth talking to health insurance and your doctors. But anyhow, we're talking costs. We've covered the first half, which is the egg freezing itself, which is 10 to 15,000. But then to your point, we need to store the eggs. And so let's say you freeze your eggs at 32 and you want to use them at 37, you have 5 years, you're going to be paying a storage fee of around $1,000 a year. So we're talking an additional $5,000. You would just pay this indefinitely until you decide to use or discard your eggs. Or if you stop paying it, then after a certain amount of time, when they don't hear from you, then they will discard your eggs for you. But I think it's like a year or two. It's like not that long. You can't just like stop paying and then go back 5 years later and be like, hey, what about those eggs? Then that's the storage fee. And then let's say you get to the point where you are 37 and you have been deemed infertile and you want to use these eggs. What does it cost then? Well, it's the second half of the IVF cycle. So we're talking another $10,000 to $15,000 because now they have to thaw your eggs and then fertilize them and then screen them and then implant them. So it's about the same amount of work as it would have been on the first half. So what we're looking at overall is $25,000 to $35,000 to do this, which is a lot of money. And so in my case, I have about $7,000 from my company post-tax. And that's great, but we're now reducing it from $25,000 to $35,000 to $18,000 to $28,000. So it is still a really meaningful financial investment. When I realized that we weren't just talking about the egg freezing costs, we also then had the ongoing storage and then the additional fee to use the eggs, I went, ooh, this is a lot of money. How do I rate the potential to have a future child against the concrete money that I would be spending now to do this? And that's really hard math to do, which is why I spiraled for 4 months and texted Zoe periodically being like, what do I do? It's really expensive, but also having a kid is pretty priceless. And if this is the way that you can ensure that you are having a kid, then it's worth spending the money. But then the more that I learned, the more that I was like, I actually don't know if that is true. When does somebody actually benefit from freezing their eggs? So assuming she has frozen her eggs, why would she use them?
Probably because when she was ready to conceive, it proved that her reserve was not sufficient. And they ruled out infertility from the men's side because that is also a huge overlooked point in society.
Yeah, in my research, I discovered that about a third of infertility is because of the woman, a third because of the man, and a third is unknown or a combination of the two. So to your point, only about half of the equation is because of the woman. So anyhow, yeah, exactly. The woman goes to get pregnant. They're trying for enough time to be considered infertile. If you're under 35, it's 12 cycles, about a year. And if you're 35 or older, then it's only 6 cycles, which is great because you can speed it up. But that's because you're now in geriatric, quote unquote, territory. So we want to make sure that we are intervening sooner and not just like letting you wait until you've run out of fertility. Infertility affects approximately 15% of couples in the United States, which is a non-negligible amount, but it's also like a somewhat small amount. This is all couples regardless of how old they are. So let's assume that the couple has been trying, they've been deemed infertile, she's part of this 15%. So then they're going to work with their fertility doctor, they're going to run some tests, they're going to prioritize interventions. On a typical basis, these interventions would go from least invasive to most invasive. And so this is assuming there's not a particular form of infertility that was discovered that would require a more invasive intervention sooner. But if she were to go through the least invasive to most invasive, she would start with medications that would help regulate her hormone levels. She'd probably try to conceive for 2 to 4 months using just the medications. Assuming those don't work, then she'd move on to IUI, intrauterine insemination, which is like half of the IVF. We're not actually taking the egg out and then fertilizing it and then putting it in, but we are attempting to...
Turkey basting the semen into the lady.
Yeah, it's still like a somewhat invasive procedure. We do that for 2 to 4 rounds. We see if that works. And then if that doesn't work, then she will go on to IVF, which is the part of the process that egg freezing covers part of. Nobody is ever actually the norm. So this is probably not everybody's lived experience. You have people on all ends of the spectrum here. But statistically speaking, the woman would need to be infertile for long enough, or be trying and failing to get pregnant for long enough to be considered infertile. And then she would go through these multiple rounds of less invasive interventions. And then at that point, she would consider IVF, which means at that point, she would be eligible to use, or she would be considering using her frozen eggs.
And what happens for someone who needed IVF, but they didn't freeze their eggs 5 years earlier?
The short answer is if she hasn't frozen her eggs, she will just have to go through IVF at that time, and hopefully she will get enough good, high-quality eggs that it will work. I'm going to show you a graph. What we're looking at here, I should make you describe it, but you don't have your glasses on, so I'm going to do it, unless you want to take a stab.
What is the title of this graph? Is this just like natural fertilization, or is this specifically for IVF?
So this is for using frozen eggs.
Okay. So on the x-axis, the bottom horizontal one, it's the number of mature oocytes and the probability of having at least one live birth on the y-axis. So you would think that the more mature oocytes you're able to store away, your probability would increase. I'm not sure what these colors are. I'm assuming it's age. Yeah, it's age of the egg donor. I guess the big point is that there's an inflection point. Like at 20 eggs is basically diminishing returns thereafter. I would not say it's significantly different from younger than 35 to 38 years old. And then once you hit 40, it takes more eggs to get one live birth.
Yeah, exactly. Really good summary. So exactly, we have curves where the more high quality eggs, mature oocytes you have gotten from your egg retrieval round, the more likely it is that you will have one live birth. And so we can see that there's not that much of a change when you're under 35 between the quality of the egg, but as you get older, the quality of the egg declines. And so now you need more and more and more eggs in order to have a high probability of having a birth. So long-winded way of answering your question, but if this person has not previously frozen their eggs, then they are going through the egg retrieval at the age that they're trying to get pregnant. So in my hypothetical case, the person is 37, which means that they're following this purple line, which means that they are slightly less likely to get high quality eggs and therefore be able to get pregnant from one round of IVF than someone who is younger than 37, but is actually not as much of a difference as you think.
Yeah, it really becomes linear at 44 years old.
Yeah, and you start seeing a really big drop right around 40. So it gets harder the older you get, but my interpretation of this graph is it does not get significantly harder until around 40. So the person who did not freeze her eggs, if she's attempting to get pregnant at 37, she can just go through IVF, and most likely with at least 1 to 3 rounds of IVF, she will get enough eggs that at least one of them will be high enough quality that it will fertilize well and survive implantation, etc. Which brings me to my next point, which is who actually is a good candidate for egg freezing. And I think we just kind of alluded to it, which is if you are 37 or younger, statistically speaking, you will be able to do IVF and it will work. It might take you a couple rounds. We're not necessarily talking like one and done, but you probably are still producing enough eggs at a high enough quality that with a few interventions, you will be able to have a child with your eggs at that age. My opinion, based on all the papers I read, is that it's really when you're getting closer to 40 and trying to get pregnant that you just don't have IVF as an option anymore.
What were you counseled on when you were speaking with the clinics?
It's a good question. One of the clinics basically told me at 31, if I'm not attempting to get pregnant in the next 6 to 12 months, I should consider freezing my eggs.
At 31?
I am taking that with a grain of salt because they're trying to sell me egg freezing.
Yes, everyone remember that these are businesses. All of healthcare is a business. And particularly private fertility clinics are a business. Okay, what did the second one say?
The second one agreed a little bit more with the research. And so there's this one really important study that I read that looked at like when is the optimal time to freeze your eggs. And basically the youngest that they say is 31, 32. Like right around now, I know enough about my future to have a pretty good sense of how soon I'm going to be trying to get pregnant.
Can you give us an age?
Well, so I guess for our listeners, I am about a year into a relationship. It's going well. We're not engaged. We're not living together. We're not married. So I think my answer has a lot of branching paths. But, the speed running, assuming this relationship goes well and, we do it as quickly as we can, like all the next stages, I think we'd probably be trying to have our first kid around the time that I'm 34, 35. Which means that second kid would happen around the time that I'm 37, 38.
And is that the math that you weighted most heavily in this decision?
Yeah. One of the things that I do need to keep in mind is that's the speed running version. What happens if we don't speed run it? Like, we're only a year into this relationship. What happens if this isn't the relationship for me? What happens if one of us gets a job that requires, a giant thing? What if someone's family has something happen and, we aren't able to start trying to have a family in 3 years or 2.5 years or whatever it is, because that is pretty soon. So I'll tell you what my conclusion is when we get to the end. But you're asking the right questions. So anyhow, the paper that I'm mentioning is basically saying that when you're 31, 32, that is like a really good time to start thinking about egg freezing. And it's basically a good time, a good investment up until you're about 37, 38, 39. And then at that point, you're probably not going to be able to freeze enough eggs. But basically, any time in your 30s, you're a good candidate. They did a cost-benefit analysis, assuming that you were trying to get pregnant at 40. How expensive would it be? How many rounds of IVF would you need at 40 compared to how many rounds of egg freezing would you need at the age at which you froze your eggs? And they found that it was most cost-benefit analysis favorable at like 37 years old. But at 31, 32, it's still, statistically speaking, I would still benefit from freezing my eggs, especially since I want more than one kid. Like that second kid being at 37, 38, like the moment that something in my timeline gets shifted, that second kid is happening when I'm closer to 40. So yeah, it makes it hard to evaluate.
Can I just summarize where we are here?
Yes.
Okay, so absolutely, the younger your eggs are, the better off you are in, getting pregnant, it working, the better off the kid is, the less risk of like Down syndrome and any other thing that is like linked to age at fertility, which is not just the female, it's also the male. But you also have to think about it because it's expensive. It's the 10 to 15 grand to capture the eggs. It's the grand per year to store the eggs. And we're probably not getting into this, it's, the changing political landscape of what it means to be alive. And it's when do you think you would need them? And that is all of the math that goes into the decision. And we have to remember that IVF clinics, while they're not wrong in saying younger eggs are better, are businesses and they want your business and they want your money. They might tell you 31, but the studies say you have until 37, and that saves you at least $7,000 in the grand scheme of things.
I think that is a lovely summary. I am going to caveat it with one thing, which is that waiting until you're 37 may or may not save you money. Okay, so the last graph we were looking at and both of these charts are from the same paper. It will be linked in our show notes. It was a research paper attempting to understand the likelihood of live birth based on how old you are when you freeze your eggs, etc. So for each age of the woman considering freezing her eggs, they have how many eggs did they retrieve from the single round of egg freezing, and then what is the likelihood that that number of eggs goes on to produce a live birth. And so I have two circles, one on the left graph and one on the right. So a woman who is 37 who goes through this, statistically speaking, her standard deviation, she will average 11.8 mature oocytes retrieved per cycle, plus or minus 6.9. And so then we can come to the graph on the right, and this is percentages of live birth based on the number of oocytes that had been taken out. And so we can look at that same confidence interval. We can plug it on here and say this 37-year-old who went through one round of egg freezing, based on if she gets, the low end of eggs to the high end of eggs, what is the percent likelihood that she would be able to have a single child from that? And in this woman who was 37, who went through one round of egg freezing, she has a 34 to 82% chance of having one live birth.
The sample size, exclusion criteria, like what happens for like the lady was in a car accident when she was pregnant and lost the egg? Like, is it just like through the course of 9 months it happens or it doesn't? Or is it excluding those cases that are not that there's a confounding variable affecting viability of the fetus?
Zoe is a doctor, everybody. That is a really good question. I can go back and look at the research paper and confirm. I think it would be excluding the confounding variables. I think this study was kind of a meta-analysis or a statistical modeling exercise, not necessarily just tracking. Yeah, it's a really good question. But essentially the things that could lead to somebody successfully having a pregnancy or not, it is, do you have a mature oocyte? Did that mature oocyte get fertilized? Is that fertilized egg chromosomally normal? If it is chromosomally normal, then you can implant it, but there is only a 35% chance that individual implanted eggs will take and your body will accept it as a pregnancy and it will carry it on. And then there is, once it has been uptaken in your body and you are carrying the pregnancy, does your body carry it to term or do you miscarry it? But since you have ruled out the chromosomal abnormalities, the likelihood of miscarriage is a lot lower.
I mean, it's also just like a wide variability. That's really what I'm looking at. It's like you can't draw anything from that.
Well, I think you can draw something, but what you can draw is that it's unknowable.
So you're just back to where you started.
Well, but I think that's important. I think I went into this process thinking that freezing my eggs would be a bit of a sure thing. Like, I would be like cashing away money in a retirement account and then I'd be able to withdraw from it when I wanted to retire. But what I'm learning from this is it actually isn't. Like this woman who went through one round of egg freezing is like only about 50% likely to be able to actually get a baby out of that. And so, you know, she can do things like go through a second round of egg freezing and then she will have double the number of eggs that are frozen. And so she increases her odds.
Is there a sister study to this where they're comparing the IVF patient to, like, they're matching the IVF 37-year-old patient to the natural insemination 37-year-old patient? The IVF has a 50% chance of working. Is it 50% more than if she just said, fuck it, we're going to do the natural route? Like, if I'm fertile, I'm fertile?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, that is not this study, but that is a different study. That is the one that I was talking about, which was the, like, when is it most cost effective? I will be linking all the studies in the show notes. But yeah, essentially a woman who is 37, on average, it will take her more than 6 months to get pregnant, which means about 50% of women who are above 35 are going to be infertile, quote unquote, statistically infertile.
So it's basically the same because this 37-year-old who's doing IVF still likely has to do multiple rounds, and each round is like a month.
Yeah, well, each round is a month and a lot of money.
That too.
So yeah, kind of what I'm seeing is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It is hard to get pregnant. It's hard to stay pregnant. It is expensive to try and find a workaround. That workaround is not guaranteed. I mean, we're looking at here a woman who is attempting to freeze her eggs at 37 and or go through IVF at 37. We're not looking at somebody who froze her eggs at 31 and is attempting to use them at 37. And this is basically just the tabular format of the graph we were looking at previously. Someone who is younger than 35, one round of IVF will get her around 20 eggs on average, which actually has her possibility of having one live birth up above 90%. If you freeze them earlier, you're much more likely to have a single round lead to a baby. But these are all averages. These are all standard deviations. Like, your individual experience will vary widely, which is why I like this paper, because it does have standard deviations. And so you can do the math and say, like, well, averaging, I will get 90% chance. But what if I come out on the low end? What if I come out on the high end? And then you find that that's where all the variation really is. We should do a stats episode at some point.
No, we shouldn't. I hate stats. You can teach me.
I will teach you. Yeah, skewed data sets, like, you actually should be using median and not average. But yeah, to sum up everything, it's hard to get pregnant. It's hard to get pregnant naturally, but you're probably likely to have it happen, you know, within 6 to 12 months or with some interventions. And those interventions are probably likely to work with at least a few rounds of them up until the point that you're in your mid to late 30s, you know, 37, 38. Once you get closer to or surpassing 40, that's when even the interventions are probably not going to work. And so you are going to be a good candidate for freezing your eggs if you are in your early to mid 30s and you pretty seriously believe that you will be trying to have a kid in your late 30s through early 40s.
And this is when I should say that medicine is more of an art than people want to believe or people understand. We read the textbooks, whatever, those first 2 years of medical school where we're in class reading the textbooks, they set a foundation, but what's really important is the practice and the exposure over and over again to understand the art of medicine.
Yeah, a piece of advice I was given repeatedly from the books and articles I was reading and people I talked to was finding the right fertility clinic is important, finding one who does a lot of this sort of cycle, because then they will understand the art of how to manipulate the hormones, when to prescribe which to you, especially if you are coming in with a slightly more abnormal situation. If you have low egg counts or, some hormone is off track or whatever, they will know how to handle that because they've gone through it a lot. And so that is where you make sure that you get a lot more bang for your buck. Like, this egg freezing cycle will cost you the same if you wind up getting one egg out of it because the drugs were prescribed poorly for your body, or if you get 20 eggs out of it. Like, it's the same cost, basically. So,
are these clinics also helping the male side of infertility?
Oftentimes, fertility clinics are predominantly like infertile couples, and then egg freezing is kind of a side business. I read something that the assistive reproductive technology industry right now in the fertility preservation space, about 75% of fertility preservation is actually embryo freezing, not egg freezing, which is when the couple is experiencing infertility or wants to preserve their like shared fertility. Which I guess while we're on the topic, I'll touch on super briefly. I am focusing this conversation on, the single ladies out here like me who are trying to preserve their individual fertility, but there's also the option as a couple to preserve your shared fertility by freezing embryos. They have about the same success rate. Freezing embryos is slightly they have a slightly better thaw rate than eggs, but not by a meaningful margin. The only benefit to, in my experience, the only benefit to freezing embryos over eggs is that your embryo, you can do the genetic testing at the point that you freeze it, not the point that you are thawing it, which allows you to get a better sense of if you have chromosomally normal embryos. So if I go through one round of my egg retrieval and we create embryos, then we can say, oh, all of my embryos are chromosomally normal. I can freeze them and feel good about it. If I don't do that and I'm just freezing eggs, and then I fertilize them 5 years later when I'm too old to be going through egg freezing, and it turns out that all of them are chromosomally abnormal because my partner gave me some bad sperm or something, then I'm kind of out of luck. Yeah, so that is the like benefit of freezing an embryo, but then you get into a lot of when does life start? How does your state regulate embryos? How would you feel if you and your partner broke up and then you had a frozen embryo? Whose child was that? Do they get to keep it? Do you have to destroy them all? Like, there's a lot that you need to think about when you go down that rabbit hole. So we're not going down that rabbit hole in this episode, but just putting a pin in it that technically 75% of fertility preservation services are embryo related, not egg related. But this is a very rapidly growing area of fertility preservation, especially as companies are providing it as a benefit. So yeah, that's how egg freezing works.
So can I guess are you at your decision? Are you at the big reveal?
I can be, yeah.
I want to guess.
Do it.
Okay. A lot of these numbers are focusing on 37. So my guess is you're giving yourself the cutoff at like 35 or 36. And if at that point you are not in a relationship or at a time in your life where children are imminent, you will freeze your eggs.
Ooh, you are astute, Zoe. That's not exactly what I'm doing, but it is very close.
Okay.
So I sat down and I thought about all these numbers.
I have a question. To what degree was your current partner involved in this conversation? Or did you specifically leave him out?
Good question. I have taken him along this journey. I definitely have been talking his ear off about it. He has been handling it super well. I think it's an early relationship, and this is really a decision I would be making for my own fertility, which he will hopefully be benefiting from, or hopefully, not need to benefit from, but you know what I mean? Like, hopefully he would be the partner who would be benefiting from this if we needed to benefit from it. But I'm not freezing embryos. Like, it isn't about him. It really is about me. And so I think he took a really good approach to it, where he was like, I will support you if this is what you want to do. I will listen to you. I will also help you understand what my sort of timeline would be, assuming this continues to go well. Because if he was like, I don't want kids for 5 years, I mean, first off, we'd have to be like, is this relationship the right one for me? But also, I'd have to be like, is that timeline, like, does that impact my view of my timeline? Or if he was like, I would have a kid with you tomorrow, like, do I even need to have this conversation? So it was, he took a really good approach to it. So he was brought along on the journey because he was willing to come on the journey. But at the end of the day, he did a really good job being like, this is your journey. What do you need? Like, how are you making the decision?
Okay. So the decision, drum roll.
The big reveal. So I think you were pretty close. I crunched all the numbers. I looked at where I'm at in my life right now. I'm looking at the fact that projecting my future out, I could potentially see myself having my kids by the time I'm 37-ish. And I feel pretty confident that my, like, regular fertility interventions would work for me up until the time I'm 37-ish. I should caveat that in this process. If I had to
guess, you're pretty fertile.
Yeah. As part of this process, I did go through the first round of testing with one of the fertility providers, and I'm like smack dab average. Maybe slight, I don't know. I was like within the confidence interval on the like good end. So I felt good about where I am. To Zoe's point at the beginning of this podcast, current fertility, not predictive of future fertility. And I actually did want to mention this. Some fertility clinics use the scare tactic of telling women that they have a low ovarian reserve, therefore they have to freeze their eggs. And in my research, it's actually the opposite, which is a low ovarian reserve means that you have few eggs in your body right now. But what that means is that by freezing your eggs, you will not get very many eggs frozen.
Yeah, you have to do it more and more and more.
Yeah, but by having a low ovarian reserve, you are not actually any less likely to get pregnant in the future because you only need one egg in order to get pregnant.
And it says nothing about the quality.
Yeah. So, and ovarian reserve is often measured by AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone levels. So just if somebody is starting to pursue this and they get told like, oh my God, you have a low ovarian reserve, therefore you have to freeze your eggs right now. It's actually the opposite. You actually do not want to freeze your eggs right now because your hormones are in such a position and your ovarian reserve is in such a position that it would not get you results that would be likely to get you a baby from it. And then you'd have to go through multiple rounds and spend a lot of money, and you're still not super likely to get a baby from it, but it actually is not indicating your inability to get pregnant naturally. So anyhow, all this to say, I had pretty good AMH levels. I look pretty normal. I had a normal number of follicles. So at least as of right now, my fertility is looking pretty good. And the big part of your fertility is unknowable, is like, will you be able to get pregnant? Will you be able to stay pregnant? And that is really about you and your partner together and what you're both bringing to the table. And it's also in the future. So it's just unknowable. So since I cannot know what my future fertility will look like, since I cannot know exactly what my timeline will look like, but since I have a timeline that feels somewhat good, that would allow me to have my children in a time where I would have viable alternatives, I don't feel at this moment that I need to freeze my eggs. But my current plan is to wait 1 year, maybe even 9 months, and reevaluate. And the big thing I'm going to reevaluate on is, what is the state of my relationship and are we on track? Because I think it'll be pretty obvious. Right now we're talking 3.5 years out, 2.5 years out. I can't remember the math. We would be like reaching the point of being ready to start a family in, call it 2.5 years.
Are you someone who feels that they need to go down the proper line of relationship, engagement, marriage, have a house, get pregnant? Does it have to be in that order?
No.
Okay.
And luckily my partner is, I think we're both on the same page, which is like, you got to do a lot of those steps before you'd have a kid, but we don't need all of those steps. Like, I think we would need to reach the point where we are like, yes, we are committed to being together. So like at least engaged. But like, I don't need to buy a house. I don't need to be married. I don't need to have been married for a certain amount of time. So assuming we're at the point where we're agreed we're going to be together, then let's get started. It's going to take a while anyway. The baby takes 9 months to cook, even if it happened on day one. So like, we got time. So yeah, in a year, I think I'll have a much better sense of if we're on the timeline that I think we would need to be on to not freeze my eggs. And then...
Should we mark our calendars for a follow-up conversation?
Ooh, that's a great idea. Yeah, a year from now, I'll say, yeah, we're on track, or nope, I'm going through it. Okay. How do you feel about all this? I don't know, did you learn something? Has this impacted your view on your fertility at all? I know that you're already married. You guys are probably closer to having kids than I would be. But yeah, what do you think?
I'm really glad I didn't have to go through this thought process. I don't think I'm as capable as Jackie is getting all the information I need.
That's what I'm here for. If you do have to go down a rabbit hole, I got you.
I find the prospect of rabbit holes really stressful.
Says the woman starting a podcast.
Yeah, it's forcing me to. Like, I'm trying to be more curious. I'm trying to be less precious with my time in that way. It doesn't affect me. As you said, I'm married. We won't be trying this year. We'll probably try next year. I am 31, going on 32. I am more stressed about the fact that my partner is 3 years older than me, because age of sperm does count, but...
Not as much.
Not as much. But it is a factor. So it doesn't affect my decision, but I am really glad that you did the work. You should all do your own research, but this is a good foundation, and I think Jackie is a trustworthy source.
Thank you.
I'm glad that she was able to articulate this for everyone our age, because it is a hot button topic in some ways, in adjacent ways. So to get the reality check is really important.
Yeah. I have multiple friends who were young and healthy and went to try and conceive, and it didn't go well. And I know of other people who successfully got pregnant without trying at 40. And so I think understanding the process is really important. Understanding the variation is really important. And just like knowing what your options are and what they actually are, not just what the salespeople are telling you they are, is really important. What are the levers you have to pull, and how much does pulling the lever mean? Yeah,
I think, for all of those people who are at the start of this journey, it's important to know that pregnancy is really hard and uncomfortable, and it makes you feel a lot of things, and it's very stressful. So it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be stressful. And that, when you're interfacing with healthcare, particularly in this situation, you're the consumer, and this sounds more like dealing with a used car dealership than a doctor who cares about you. So if you're getting Danny DeVito in that Matilda movie, then you should leave. So what I want to say about this is that, pregnancy is hard from start to finish, and then having a child is no easier, and it's not going to be perfect. There's 1,000 ways to do it, and the kid will probably turn out fine if you are a reliable parent for him. That's what they need at the end of the day. And just to know that it will be hard and you're not doing something wrong when it does become hard, I think is really important for people to understand. And I think it's really important for people to understand that at the end of the day, anytime you're interfacing with healthcare, but particularly when you're not acutely ill and dying, you are a consumer and you have the right to make informed choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was nuts to me how different the two fertility clinics treated my intro conversation, where the one was like, you got to do this right now. And the other one was like, here is the science. We cannot predict your future fertility. Let me talk about papers. And yeah, even just in my limited experience, I saw a wide range of ways that the clinics were handling it, and how pushy they were being, and how factual they were. So it does vary a lot, and you got to be scrupulous. Is that the phrase?
Probably. So what would you tell your 20-year-old self, Jackie?
Ooh, I have a lot of thoughts. I think we just touched on one of them. The first one was that, like, everybody is trying to sell you something, and if I had just gone with the first fertility clinic, which was like, you got to do this right now, I don't think I would have made a bad choice. And like the majority of women who are surveyed about their egg freezing decisions do not regret it. But I also don't know that I would have made the right choice for me. And having done my research, I feel a lot more confident that I'm making the right choice. And then if I revisit it in a year, I will feel better. So yeah, I think just like not taking advice at face value, especially when it is expensive, when it has to do with your health. That's the first piece of advice. Don't give into the fear. I think there's a huge FOMO around like, you're getting older. Oh my God, geriatric pregnancy at 35, right around the corner. But like, I actually felt a lot of relief going through this, learning that there are a lot of viable alternatives up until the point around when you're 40. Like you could be 37 and 38 and you can still go through IVF and you might need multiple rounds, but like you are still likely to have your own biological child. And yeah, so there was a lot of relief from that. So definitely take the advice you get as a grain of salt. And don't be afraid to seek a second opinion. I think those are the two big ones. And I guess the third one is just that you have more time and more options than you think when dealing with things like the geriatric pregnancy thing is like, that's a scary term. And I'm approaching that age and definitely going to have both of my children when I'm that age or older. But yeah, it's not as, there are a lot more options and the timeline is a lot longer than I thought it would be. What do you think? Do you have advice for your younger self based on this?
Based on this, maybe not. Based on children in particular, I was definitely staunchly opposed to having kids, but now I'm married to someone who I want to see be a father, and it's not that I have a strong maternal drive personally, but I want to have a family with him. And I do want, I want to be a mentor. So hopefully, when pregnancy ultimately does come, the hormones will soften out the edges. I think, when I was in my 20s, I was very distracted about having an eating disorder. And so I think my advice along the lines of this topic is that it's okay if you have kids. And it's okay that your body changes. And it's okay that you're overwhelmed. It's what you do about it. And as you said, making informed decisions and taking the time to become informed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's such a good summary. Yeah, your body will change. Life is long. Things will change. You will have different priorities than you did when you're in your 20s, and that's okay. And just because you do or don't want something when you're in your 20s doesn't mean that you will or won't want it later. And that's great. Thanks for going on this journey with me, Zoe, and all of our listeners. Anybody
Thanks
listening,
for doing all the work.
Well, you'll do all the work on the next episode. So yeah, if you're a listener and you like this, you can like and subscribe and follow. We're going to do this on all of the platforms, and I don't know how to give this spiel, but I'm sure you've heard it before, so I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Tell your friends, leave a 5-star comment. You can find us at After Mash on Instagram and TikTok.
After Mash Pod.
After Mash Pod, Instagram and TikTok, and we're aiming to release episodes, if not every week, every other week. And if you have anything you're curious about, drop it in the comments.
Yes. I think Zoe and I have a lot of questions that we want to answer for ourselves, but I'm sure you guys have questions of things that you wanted to explore before and you just haven't had the time to do it. So make us do the hard work for you.
Or if you're an expert and want to come on, hit us up. Slide into the DMs.
Thanks for listening, guys. Catch you next time after MASH.